Get ready for Changing Worldviews with Sharon Hughes, the 30-minute show packed with an hour's worth of information, bringing you familiar guests on important issues such as immigration, education, the Middle East, culture, religion, and the changing worldviews of Americans and the world. You've seen her on Fox News, you've read her on the World Wide Web. Now here's Sharon.
For such a time as this.
Freeing the minds of the brainwashed masses.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to this edition of Changing Worldviews. Today, Iran has denied nuclear inspectors entry to one of their military bases. Iran made it quite clear the International Atomic Energy Agency will not be visiting the Perchin military base as part of the interim agreement reached over the Islamic regime's nuclear program. Spokesman of Iran's Atomic Energy Organization said on Sunday that, quote, visiting Perchin is not included in the 7 steps of an agreement with the IAEA, and the reason given is that it's a military base and not a nuclear facility. The denied access is particularly concerning following a Pentagon report last week that acknowledges the U.S. would have no clue if Iran acquired nuclear weapons. As already reported, a senior Iranian naval commander says his country has sent several warships to the Atlantic Ocean close to U.S. maritime borders for the first time. The announcement came hours after Iran's supreme leader said the United States would overthrow the Iranian government if it could, and Washington had a, quote, controlling and meddlesome attitude towards the Islamic Republic. The commander of Iran's Northern Navy fleet said that the vessels have already begun the journey to the Atlantic Ocean via waters near South Africa. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Author and expert on the Nation of Israel, Joel Rosenberg, is my guest to talk about the latest developments in the Middle East, particularly in Israel, including the threat of Iran nuclear weapons. Stay with me.
You're listening to Sharon Hughes, coming to you from the Wild, Wild West, and we mean wild.
We're going to continue with Joel Rosenberg, the New York Times bestselling author of 5 nonfiction books and 7 novels, his latest, The Damascus Countdown, to talk to us about the nuclear threat of Iran. Former aide of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will give us some behind-the-scenes information.
Let me just say for the record, the Washington Times says of your novels, they are, quote, ripped from the headlines, next year's headlines. And so, I know you don't claim them to be prophetic, but it's uncanny how accurate what you have written. And in that sense, they probably do have that prophetic reality to them. And, it's very interesting, the mainstream media. And, of course, you have been a guest on many of the shows that most people would be aware of. But it is interesting that the left stream media seems to favor Palestinians, seems to, of course, be anti-war, who's pro-war anyway, but doesn't necessarily bring some of these things out so that the American people can really understand what's going on. John Adams, one of our founders, said, facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be our wishes, our inclinations, or the dictates of our passions, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence. And I can't help but think, I've got a little cartoon here in my office. We're all familiar with the 3 monkeys, hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil. Well, this one is hear no truth, see no truth, speak no truth, and flat out ignore the truth. And it gets down to this. A lover of truth is willing to look at things the way they are, no matter how troubling it might be, how fearful it may be to consider, but that the truth is the only thing that helps us to prevent things from happening, such as another Hitler's Holocaust or anything else on lesser levels, right?
That's right. And that's what our Lord Jesus said, was you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. And in this case, our leaders and other world leaders simply aren't willing or perhaps able to really squarely look at the truth, as grim as it is, and make decisions based upon it. And so the big question, of course, is there's 2. One, in the absence of the United States taking leadership to stop Iran from getting the bomb, what will Israel do? That's the question in Damascus Countdown, but that's the question in real life. And I think that's why Damascus Countdown has been on the New York Times bestseller list for 3 weeks running now since it released.
Great.
Because I think there's a lot of interest in that question, and what would it look like if Israel does, in fact, launch a preemptive military strike, a massive strike, on Iran's nuclear facilities, and what would the blowback look like? What happens when Iran retaliates? Do they also draw Syria and the leadership in Damascus into that fight to annihilate Israel? And so that's one set of questions. The other question is, where are we going in prophecy? What are the prophetic implications of all these things? How might these events, in a sense, trigger end times Bible prophecies that could lead us right up to the return of Jesus Christ? And those are two sets of very interesting questions, both of which I write about in this series that ends with Damascus Countdown. They're both unknowable at the moment, but we can speculate and say, here's a scenario or a few scenarios that could happen. We'd better make sure that we're ready spiritually and in every other way, because events are moving quite rapidly and quite dangerously right now.
Well, we're going to give you an opportunity in just a minute to tell our listeners the best way to get a hold of Damascus Countdown. And if you haven't read the 12th Imam and also the Tehran Initiative, encourage you to get all three of them. It's better than any Tom Clancy novel or film that was made after them. You will not be sorry if you have not read these books or any of Joel's books. But before we do that, Joel, if you could talk to the entire nation about what's going on, what would you say?
Well, I think that we need to turn to prayer. We don't have individually influence to change the American government or the Israeli government or the Iranian government or the North Korean government, but we serve, as followers of Jesus Christ, we serve the King of Kings. All of these men that run these countries are answerable ultimately to Jesus Christ, and we are adopted into his family. We are his children. He has adopted us. He has bought us out of sin and death. That's the great message of Passover and Easter. And so we need to get on our faces and pray and ask the Lord for peace in Jerusalem, peace in the Middle East, peace in the the Korean Peninsula. And we need a third great awakening in our own country, where the church, where believers are revived, because right now the church is drifting and losing spiritual altitude, I would say. And this is a very dangerous moment, but it's not going to be solved by us just worrying about it or even just talking or reading about it. We have to be engaged in that spiritual battle.
Yes.
And I would sum all that up to say we need to pray for peace, but we need to be prepared for war. The Bible does say, Jesus said in Matthew 24, that there will be wars and rumors of wars and revolutions in the last days. So God might allow some of these things to happen. All the more we should be praying for our persecuted brothers and sisters in the Middle East and in North Korea, and praying that the gospel would be presented far and wide in these regions, so that those who face danger can have the great hope and the good news that they too can be adopted into God's family because of what Christ did on the cross.
Joel, that is what our show is all about, is to get the truth out so people know how to pray, and if there's anything we can do in terms of being active or engaged in civic responsibility and so forth. Otherwise, if you don't have the truth, you can be praying according to your perception and your worldview. The truth is hand in hand with prayer. We want to pray and be in reality at the same time, and knowing that ultimately God is in control, but he wants us to pray, as you said. Well, please tell our listeners the best way to get a hold of your books. I'm sure they're in every single store, but is there a particular website you want to forward our listeners to?
Yes, Damascus Countdown and all of the books, novels and nonfiction books, you could find it at any local Christian bookstore or regular bookstore, Barnes & Noble, what have you. But you can also find it online. You can come to joelrosenberg.com And then we've got links to a lot of those type of bookstores where you can find it, and we'll be happy to have you to find it there.
That's great. And ladies and gentlemen, I subscribe to Joel's newsletter. I love the fact that he is not so concerned about giving opinions and certainly not rhetoric about what's going on, but just informing us of the latest. And I so appreciate that, Joel, and the work that you're doing. Thank you. Thank you for doing this. And you, I know, are one of the major voices, particularly in the body of Christ, but beyond that, as we talked about your background and helping to get the truth out. And then hopefully people will be moved to do whatever they can do, such as with your Joshua Fund, to make a difference in people's lives, to touch them. So,
well, I appreciate it very much. Yes, and people can learn more about what we're doing to help provide food, clothing, medical supplies, Bible teaching, pastor training in Israel and the region by going to joshuafund.net, joshuafund.net, or there's links, of course, from my site, joelrosenberg.com. But we really appreciate those who are learning, praying, giving, and going to the work of the Lord in the Middle East, especially at a time such as this.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Joel, for being with us. Really appreciate it, and would love to have you back on, as this is not going to go away probably any time too soon.
It'd be an honor. I appreciate it very much.
Hey, this is Brian Sussman. The whole truth and nothing but the truth. That's what you'll get with Sharon Hughes.
Exposing the worldviews behind the political, cultural, and ideological wars being waged in our nation and world, Sharon packs an hour's worth of information into every half hour with news you can use.
Academia is often the wellspring of race hatred. This is something that we need to recognize. Eugenics, indeed, was a campaign to create a master race by do-gooders and progressives. They were attempting to create a utopia.
What's ending up happening is that Christians who say, I don't care about issues, they realize that's what's being used to silence the gospel. If they can silence the truth, they will silence the gospel.
You're being a watchwoman on the wall, Sharon. I say that with all sincerity. Appreciate what you're doing to sound the alarm, and we need more shows like yours.
Changing Worldviews is funded entirely through the tax-deductible donations of our supporters. If you've not done so already, renew your active support today. And if you're new to Changing Worldviews, would you consider helping us with a donation, becoming a monthly partner to help get the truth out and tell the world the side of the story that mainstream media doesn't report? Thank you so much ahead of time for supporting our efforts.
Coming up on our next show,
there are some very sophisticated people who work for governments, criminal organizations, syndicates, terrorist organizations that have exceptional skills that aren't just creating websites and uploading video.
We're going to be talking about the threat of a cyber attack with author Ron Rhodes on his latest book on the subject, and much, much more. Last October, there was an interesting article that talked about from CatholicNews.com that the Palestinian president hopes to use the pen of the Pope to sign the peace treaty. Pope Francis gave Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas a fancy pen as a gift, and Abbas told the Pope, I hope to sign the peace agreement with Israel with this pen. And the Pope responded that he hoped that the agreement would be reached soon. Now, the Pope on Sunday announced a long-awaited trip to Israel, the West Bank, and Jordan. And on Sunday, the Palestinian news agency said that Abbas welcomed the visit and said he hoped it would contribute to alleviate the suffering of the Palestinian people. Arutz Shiva, Israel National News Service, reported that Rabbi Sergio Bergman, who is a member of the Argentinian parliament and close friend of Pope Francis, remember the Pope is from Argentina, claimed that the Pope intends to define himself as the Che Guevara of the Palestinians and support their struggle and rights. In late December, it was similarly noted that the Pope will not host mass prayer services in Jerusalem during his trip, but instead in Palestinian Authority-controlled Bethlehem as a show of support. And the move is slightly ironic, as most Christians have reportedly been driven out of the city by Muslims. All the while, Abbas has claimed that Jesus was Palestinian. And it's interesting that Deputy Foreign Minister Zeev Elkin last July rejected reports that the Foreign Ministry was planning to sign an agreement transferring all or part of King David's tomb located on Mount Zion in Jerusalem to the Vatican. But despite his assurances, Rabbi Israel Ariel, founder of the Temple Institute, warned that the Pope's visit may be time for exactly such a transfer of ownership to occur. And he was referencing the 2008 agreement by the government to relinquish control of the historic Russian compound buildings in Jerusalem to Russian control. Wow. I mean, it just makes your head spin, everything that is going on in the Middle East. And of course, we do not hear about all these stories and all the infighting, all the side deals that are made, and if nothing else, it should help us to understand why there's so much turmoil there. In the meantime, Benjamin Netanyahu, let's go full circle back to what Iran is doing, simulating attacks on Israel and on U.S. ships. Netanyahu said those who strike Israel will be hit in return, and he was warning Gaza terrorists that what is happening is that the international community is reducing sanctions on Iran, but Iran is increasing its aggression. Iran continues to provide lethal weapons to terrorist organizations, continues butchering in Syria, and now has added the following: the blatant and sharp attack by the Iranian ruler on the U.S., along with sending warships to the Atlantic Ocean. And Netanyahu was referring to a speech of Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei on Saturday, in which he slammed U.S. policy towards Iran as, quote, controlling and meddlesome, and said that the U.S. was lying when it said it did not seek regime change in Iran. We'll be right back after this. I'd like to encourage you to get a hold of this month's special offer. Not only do you get a great resource, but it also helps us pay for airtime. And this month, for a donation of $25 or more to Changing Worldviews, I would love to send you the 4-part series on CD, What Every American Needs to Know About the Quran, with modern-day historian and author William Federer. It's one of our most popular listened to shows online as we talk about a history of Islam and the United States and what that means.
It would catapult the heads of the Christians into the city like cannonballs, the ones that he had killed. I mean, wow. And he saw himself as literally killing the infidel. He thought he was serving Allah. So the thing is that when people say, well, jihad is just this personal struggle, it's like, where were you 1,400 years ago? Why didn't you tell Muhammad and the caliphs that it was just supposed to be a personal struggle? Obviously, the historical record of the last 1,400 years shows that the majority of Muslims have viewed it as a literal submission, conquering of the world.
Again, for a donation of $25 or more this month, your gift to Changing Worldviews will go directly to pay for airtime, and I would love to send you this outstanding resource. And you can get it by sending your check to Changing Worldviews, P.O. Box 750624, Petaluma, California, 94975-0624, or you can order it online by going to changingworldviews.com, click on the donate button, one-time donation, and put in William Federer special offer. People are really enjoying having it.
Wow, radio couldn't get any better.
This is Cliff Kincaid of Accuracy in Media. I strongly recommend that you support the radio show of Sharon Hughes as an alternative source of good, reliable, and accurate information.
Incoming message.
Wow! All I can say is wow!
If you could read some of the emails, they're so heartening, and it's really a work that's become very effective. And so I would like to take this opportunity to just appeal to you to support Changing Worldviews. Go to the website, changeworldviews.com, click on the donate page, become a monthly partner, even if it's only $15 a month. You know, that's $15 a month helps Sharon stay on the air and helps cover the cost. It is money that is invested in our future, our meaning, not Sharon's and mine, but ours as a nation. So it helps to get the message out. Consider supporting us. If you think about it, you go have a latte, it's $5. So 3 lattes a month, which support Changing Worldviews in a big way. So I encourage you to go to the website and click on donate and make the commitment. Thank you so much.
Thank you for staying with me. I interviewed Michael Maloof earlier. He is author of A Nation Forsaken, EMP, The Escalating Threat of an American Catastrophe, talking about the very real threat of a missile, whether it's from North Korea or Iran or any of our enemies, being shot over our nation to create an EMP blackout, wiping out our entire grid system. That means everything from electricity to computers, everything. And so I want to give you a little preemptive, if you will, of that discussion with him. You don't want to miss this. This is part of the package of being prepared, not scared, being prepared, which is not just a Boy Scout motto. You know, I was reading in Girard Direct, which is a international intelligence briefing website, and they were talking about in an article, surprisingly enough, racing towards Armageddon, how a concurrence of events may find a nexus in global war. And this article talks about how America stands in the vortex of a developing perfect storm that could engulf the entire world, or as we talked about last week, a potential World War III. From Europe to Iran to North Korea to the United States, events are moving, according to this intelligence article, toward a violent confrontation of cultures. A perfect storm is defined by Merriam-Webster dictionary as, quote, a critical or disastrous situation created by a powerful concurrence of factors. And so in today's world, the factors include the economic failure of leading nations, including Europe and the United States, the social upheavals and the rise of Islamist states throughout the Middle East, the continuing development of nuclear weapons by Iran, the collusion between Iran and North Korea in their effort to defeat the West. These are serious times. Part of what I believe in Matthew 24, when Jesus said that there is coming a time of such great tribulation, greater than ever has been or ever will be, that is going to lead up to the good news, and that is his return. Well, I talked with Michael Maloof, author of A Nation Forsaken, about an EMP attack, formerly with the Defense Department. I told him how our efforts here are not to create any kind of panic or to scare our listeners, create any kind of fear, but rather to inform so that we can be prepared and not scared, because part of being able to stand in the day in which we live is to be prepared. Here's some of what Michael Maloof said in that regard.
Michael Maloof, he is a former senior security policy analyst in the Office of the Secretary of Defense and has almost 30 years of federal service in the U.S. Defense Department as a specialized trainer for special forces in select countries of Central Asia and other places, and the author of A Nation Forsaken, EMP, The Escalating Threat of an American Catastrophe. To talk to us about this threat from North Korea. We've been talking about it for the last couple of weeks, and Michael, I thank you so much for joining us here to inform our listeners about a threat that some are taking seriously, and I think too many are not taking seriously enough.
Well, thanks for having me. I would agree with that. I think the fact that North Korea has begun to show its ability to launch a nuclear weapon is reason for us to pause and really reflect on this, because it can pose a serious threat as long as that regime stays in place.
For those that are saying, you know, I've heard about what an EMP attack is, but I don't quite understand the significance of the danger that imposes. So could you just give us a basic knowledge of what that is, why we should be concerned?
Sure. An EMP is an electromagnetic pulse, and this is a high-energy burst of electromagnetic energy, and it's so supercharged and comes at such a velocity that it can absolutely knock out and fry our unguarded electronics. There's natural and man-made forms of EMP. Natural, of course, would be from solar flares, and NASA is saying that we're entering into this year and next into the solar storm maximum, in which the sun is peaking at its highest intensity now. And if we had a direct hit, it could be rather catastrophic. The second form, a man-made, is from a high-altitude nuclear explosion. And that's where the whole issue of North Korea threatened us with a preemptive nuclear strike.
Right.
And they know they can't knock out the entire U.S., but what they can do is hit us in some of our most vulnerable spots, and they are very aware of the effects of an EMP and the vulnerability of our electrical grid and other critical infrastructures that depend entirely on the grid as well as all electronic components and also on automated control systems that are governed by electricity. And they know about the vulnerabilities of our electrical grid, and that is the thing that I think could become our Achilles heel, even though it's the basis for our industrial might today.
Mm-hmm. And we're talking about computers, we're talking about electricity, we're talking about everything that really causes us to function today.
Yeah, the critical infrastructures would include the grid, your telecommunications, your energy delivery, such as oil and gas pipelines, your food and water delivery, your emergency services, your space systems, and your financial systems. All of these would be totally compromised and affected and possibly destroyed if an EMP was successful. And the one thing that I'm really concerned about is the fact that they know about the Eastern Grid. Eastern Grid, we have 3 grids in the United States, Eastern, Western, and the Texas grid. The Eastern Grid services some 70% of the U.S. population, and if they were to target that, it could dramatically affect a tremendous number of urban centers. And I've talked to other experts in the EMP field, and they just tell me that if we had an EMP catastrophic event, it probably would basically wipe out our cities.
Well, we are going to be watching this, so I encourage you to stay tuned every day, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday here on KDIA, and then, of course, on Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday for our online live streamed show. In the meantime, let me encourage you to stay aware, stay awake, stay alert, because we are not only living in a changing world, but things are really heating up, and we need to be informed and know what's going on, and we also need to educate those in our family, our friends, and spheres of influence so that everyone will know the truth. And so until I see you next time, this is Sharon Hughes saying it like it is.
Thanks for listening to Changing Worldviews with Sharon Hughes. You can get more information on today's topic or order a CD of today's show by visiting changingworldviews.com or writing us at Changing Worldviews, P.O. Box 750624, Petaluma, California, 94975-0624. You can also contact us at talk@changingworldviews.com. That's talk@changingworldviews.com. Our program is listener-supported, and we appreciate your tax-deductible donations to help us get the truth out on the important issues Sharon addresses on the show. So until next time, remember, stay alert, stay informed. We live in a changing world.